Okay, today we're going to dig into the science of how we actually learn. And it's an idea that pretty much flips centuries of tradition on its head with one simple, powerful truth. If you want to learn, you gotta do.
So, have you ever been in a lecture and you're trying to pay attention, you really are, but the speaker just keeps going and your eyes start to glaze over? Yeah, we've all been there. It's this universal feeling, and it really gets at a huge problem with the old school way of teaching.
I mean, for hundreds of years, learning has pretty much meant one thing. You listen. You know, the classic sage on the stage model. Information just flows one way, from the expert to you. You're supposed to just sit there and soak it all in. But is that really learning? That question, it changes everything. Because what if the real key to getting it, to truly understanding something, isn't just listening? What if it's about doing? You know, actually wrestling with an idea, getting your hands dirty solving a problem, and being a part of the process.
And that brings us to this really powerful concept called active learning. It's a total paradigm shift, right? It's about moving the spotlight away from the teacher and putting it right where it belongs, on the learner and what the learner is doing.
So what is this thing really? Well, at its heart, active learning is basically any kind of teaching that says, hey, the responsibility for learning, that's on you, the learner. It's not about passively being taught at, it's about actively taking control of your own journey to understanding.
There's this fantastic quote from Bonwell and Eisen. They're the ones who really put this term on the map back in the 90s, and they just hit the nail on the head. They said, to learn, students have to do more than just listen. They've got to read, write, discuss, or be engaged in solving problems. I mean, it's just so true. Learning is not a spectator sport.
Look, if you want to boil the whole thing down to its simplest form, it's really just two parts. It's about 1, doing something, and 2, thinking about what you're doing. That's it. Do something, then think about it. So simple, but man, it is absolutely revolutionary.
Okay, so this all sounds great, right? But what does the research actually say? Let's get into the evidence, because honestly, the data doesn't lie. The results are pretty staggering. So check this out. A big report back in 2012 from a Presidential Council on Science and Tech found something wild. In your standard traditional lecture course, engineering students were twice as likely to just leave the program. But when they used active learning, student retention in those same fields shot way up.
And it gets even more dramatic. That same study, it found that students stuck in those passive lecture halls were 3 times more likely to drop out of college altogether. Not just the major, but college, period. That's a huge difference. And it's not just about students sticking around, it's about how much they're actually learning. There was this enormous study, we're talking over 6,000 physics students. In traditional lectures, students' knowledge went up by about 23%. Pretty good, right? Well, in the active learning classes, it jumped by 48%. That's more than double the learning. Just wow.
All right, so we've established it works. The data is clear. But what does this stuff actually look like in a classroom? Well, what's funny is that these new techniques, they're not really new at all. They have some seriously deep roots.
Yeah, this isn't some new age fad. The basic ideas behind active teaching go back thousands of years. You can see them in the methods used by philosophers in ancient India, and you can trace a line all the way to the stuff we see in classrooms today, like think, pair, share, or student debates.
I mean, these ancient teachers were absolute pros at this. They'd use analogies to explain really tough ideas. They'd have these intense back-and-forth discussions, which they called the dialectical method. And they had something called the regressive method, where the teacher just keeps asking questions to lead the student to the answer. Sound familiar? It's basically the Socratic method, just, thousands of years earlier.
And that's what's so cool about this. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel here. We've just taken these incredibly powerful, time-tested ideas and given them a modern spin for today's classrooms. Let me give you a super simple modern example. It's called think, pair, share. It's so easy. So the teacher asks a question. First, step 1, you just think about it on your own. Then, step 2, you pair up with the person next to you and talk it over. And finally, step 3, you share your ideas with the whole class. Boom! Just like that, you've turned a quiet, passive room into a buzzing, active one. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. There are so many other cool techniques. You can have student debates, you can do role-playing exercises, collaborative group projects, you can even turn it into a game like Jeopardy! Or, and this is a really powerful one, get students to teach a concept to each other. Every single one of these things gets you out of your seat and into the action. So we've got all these options on the table. But what do the teachers themselves, the people in the trenches, think works best? And that question brings us right to the heart of the research paper this whole explainer is based on.
Okay, so the specific info we're looking at now comes from a research paper out of Jawaharlal Nehru Technological University in Hyderabad. The researcher A. Sujatha Devi went to 31 different college lecturers and basically asked them, look, when it comes down to it, what really works?
And the answers were, well, they were fascinating. Get this. When asked what works best for themselves, for their own learning, the lecturer's top pick was role play. But when they were asked what works best for their students, the overwhelming winner was student debates. Isn't that interesting? It shows how we think about learning differently for ourselves versus for other people.
But here's the real takeaway, the big idea that connects all of this. It doesn't really matter if it's a debate or role-playing or some other group project. The crucial thing, the absolute key, is that active involvement. That simple idea of doing something and thinking about it is what makes learning actually stick.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. The next time you have to learn something new, for work, for school, for whatever, don't just passively read about it. Ask yourself, okay, how can I make this active? How can you turn this from something you're just listening to into something you're actually doing? Because as all the evidence shows, that's where the magic really happens.